We are super lucky. We have two awesome presenters, Martin Coyne. Hopefully, I'm saying that correctly.
Spot
Awesome.
on.
He is from KPF. I actually worked with him, was lucky enough to work with him during KPF Tech Week, which they are going to talk about a little bit, I suppose. Martin's going to talk about how KPF brings in BIM training, BIM orientation, new staff, all of that good stuff. So I'm super excited to hear about it. KPF, as you guys probably know, is huge. And then, of course, we have Cesar Escalante. You guys have probably heard about him. If you haven't, where are you? You're under a BIM rock. This guy's been everywhere. He knows everything. He's worked for HOK. Now he's with Autodesk. He's with the man. So he's going to tell us all kinds of awesome things. I know it. I'm super excited about it. But first, we're going to hear from one of our advisors, Laura. She's going to talk about some of the practices at her firm. What is it? Clancy and Thays. Clancy and Thays got there before I did. It's a construction side of things she's going to talk about. And of course, you can get to all of Laura's information as well as our presenter information over there on the left on those clickable links that we updated today, where you can see my name kind of floating around. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Laura so she can share our tip today.
Sure, thanks, Dana. So in the mural, you all should see over on the bottom right-hand corner, I put a few screenshots, kind of what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to talk about how we're really standardizing our meeting workflows using Revisto and Autodesk Build. This will be in terms of our VDC department here at Clancy Thays. So I'm actually going to start right now in Revisto. So what we're doing is we have switched to using this platform as our main kind of model navigation tools inside of coordination meetings. I talked about it a little bit last year with the group, but we are using some new features at this point that I did want to share. Appearance templates, we can now more quickly get some really nice visuals a lot faster than we were able to in Navisworks. We have all sorts of tools we can use in terms of coloring things, hiding things, transparencies, different filters that we can use that make it really easy to kind of flip through these different visualization styles. The main way that we're using Revisto in coordination itself is to create issues. And if I flip over here to my issue tracker, I can see where I've got this like rolling list of issues that we are going to use throughout the project. Just going to scoot my zoom controls over. There we go. So if I flip back into my 3D view here, now I can really see where I can create issues if I would want to. And I was just sitting here stumped. Why is my issue box grayed out for this live demo that I'm about to do?
It's because it's grayed out.
Of course, because one of the features of Revisto that we're using is you can actually open previous versions. So I opened a previous version that had a very clear clash, but it keeps the issues tracked from the current state. So if I would go back and I could actually open up my newest version of this, it's actually then going to, it'll have that same issue list, and then I can go ahead and create an issue. We found that having that, being able to go back in version history is helpful if we're trying to like track down like what something looked like 3 months ago, like did this get fixed? What was the original location? So that's actually a helpful little hint to share. But I have this issue button here. I can create an issue. It'll snap to elements if I want to snap it to an element, or I can just put it wherever I want. I can name it appropriately. They've actually done some work, but it looks like here we've got a little fire protection issue. And I'd also like to mention that this is how I'm running, like what you're looking at now, you'd be sitting in a coordination meeting with me. I'm actively taking notes. I know I included a screenshot of build in the mural there. So I'm actually like taking meeting notes in front of everyone. That way everyone makes sure, like, let's say I write a duct size down wrong or something, someone can correct me on screen. And I think it really keeps the meeting moving pretty smoothly. So I've got my issue created in Revisto now. It's got a name assigned to it. I can tag it. So in this case, let's say I want to kind of say that's a fire protection issue. I can add that tag. The other really cool feature is it includes metadata automatically now. So I know Navis, we always had the grid. Here, I've also got a level. If I were inside of the building in a room, it would also list the room. And we can also break down further into zones. So I actually just built in some like generic models into Revit to show the different areas of this building. That way, when we're kind of creating these issue reports that I'm going to show in a minute here, if someone is not inside the model, but are just looking at this report, they actually know where that's happening.
I think that is amazing. Love that BIM, right?
Yes,
All that
it's
data.
awesome.
That is so incredible. You can actually figure that out. And I think that's one of the best things about Revisto, one of the best feedback points. We don't use it at Smith Group personally, unless one of the construction members is using it on our team projects, but is that it's so intuitive, right? It's easy to navigate. It looks like, you're doing great in this live demo. It seems super seamless.
Yeah, the navigation, I personally find the navigation a lot easier than Navisworks. Just kind of moving around here. And this issue tracking is really what takes it to the next level, to being able to have this nice list here. We've also kind of standardized we can assign a status. So if I've talked about it in the meeting, it becomes in progress. Once it is solved, it's marked as solved, then attached to minutes. And then once it's been issued as minutes, then it's closed. So by standardizing kind of all these different things within this meeting, it really helps us stay consistent. It helps us with onboarding within our own VDC department. It also increases our efficiency when we're working with repeat subs. So there's lots of good stuff that we can do with it. I mentioned reporting, so we can really easily create a report here. We can configure it, as to what we want to include, filtering it, like with anything in BIM, we can do all sorts of filters. And then that comes as a PDF. So it's all pretty easy. And then I can attach this report to my agenda in my minutes. It has all that information I was talking about there. It gives a screenshot. We can update these screenshots. And we can also just kind of flip back into the model itself. So there's a lot of ways to flip back and forth. On another project, we actually utilized, if we're looking at, here's another issue that had been cleared. You can also flip to 2D. And what I did is I actually created a key plan view in my own Revit model because of the view, it's looking at the view range. So I really wanted everything that was in that floor, which the architect's plan or RCP wasn't capturing. So I could create this key plan. I can go ahead, I can export that sheet as a PDF. I can once again kind of figure out how I'm gonna filter. And if I press OK, I'm going to end up with a PDF that then also is hyperlinked. So I can use this and I can click back. If the person I'm working with is using Revisto, that works great because then they can actually see what's going on within the model. Now, if someone's in Navisworks, we also have the ability to really quickly flip back and forth using the switch back to Navisworks. So I've done this in a case where, and I'm going to flip over to Navis. I've done this in a case where my sub wanted Navisworks issues. So I would come in here and or Navisworks viewpoints. So I would come in here, find my issue, switch back to Navis, create this viewpoint, and then actually create a viewpoint in Navisworks with that issue. So we're always trying to figure out ways that we can work more effectively with others, not trying to push something on them, but just give them a really good standard way to see how we're tracking all of these coordination issues throughout our process.
That is awesome. And it seems like your coordination meetings probably go so fast. I'm sure everybody is so appreciative of that.
Yes,
nobody hates flipping back between the Revit model and Navisworks, right? That's a nightmare.
And being able to include all these issues, and here I've got sometimes I'll have some text in here as to specific notes, and it becomes part of the minutes. So it's not going back and forth. It's also, for those of you like myself who hate issuing meeting minutes, it makes that really fast too, because at the end of the meeting, I've just got to maybe clean some things up a little bit and then done and move on to the next project. So it's been very helpful.
Yeah, Dan says, "Oh no more 4-hour coordination." I feel like sometimes they're all day. I've seen them last all day. Now, speaking of which, we do have a question, and thank you so much for putting on the mural. Love it. Do Revisto issues integrate with BIM 360, Procore, or Nuforma?
There are some integrations with BIM 360, but not the issues yet. That's honestly one of, I think one of the downsides for us is because we are trying to use BIM 360 issues for some topics. So I know they're working on more integrations, but the issue part is not there yet. So the way we look at it is that the issues we're creating in coordination are kind of like, I don't want to say standalone because they do affect everyone, but they're a little more on their own than maybe some bigger project issues that we're tracking. But we are always looking for ways to connect those two. So that is a great question because that is something that is definitely on our minds.
Absolutely. And I mean, just like you're saying, though, that PDF is so crucial. And then, of course, you can just throw that up on BIM 360 to have as a record as well.
And it looks like Ryan noted that you can elevate to a Procore RFI. So
love it. Look at you, Ryan, so quick. Now, with that being said, a few things about Mural. I was rude not to mention because I was so excited about this presentation. Now, you can see here, there's some different colored boxes people are floating around. Now, if you don't use these boxes, that's absolutely fine. If you figure out how to put a note on there, we are happy. But you can see that over here where my name is floating around, most likely, we have some boxes that essentially pertain to some different disciplines, right? And we tried to be kind of smart and throw an image of what that discipline is. We actually have them listed up here at the top, right? So this is actually locked. You can't copy these because these tell you what the disciplines are. All right. But if you come down here, like for example, I consider myself a BIM IT landing person. I would take this box and I would just Control C, Control V, copy that box and move it over. The very two least things that you should let us know is how you're doing today and where you're calling from. One of you that shares will win a $25 gift card. Last month's winner was Alexius. I hope I am pronouncing that correctly. Allison will contact you to get a $25 gift card. So congratulations to you. I should also mention before we move on to Martin that we have two new advisors. Super excited for our two new advisors. We should welcome Jason Pekovich and Zach Emerson. So thank you guys so much for joining our group and bringing great info to BIMXT. Of course, let us know more on the mural about what you'd like to see, any information that you have to share or questions you have for the presenters. And with all of that said, stop sharing and move on to Martin. How's it going today, Martin?
Not too bad, thanks. Hope my accent is fairly understandable for everyone from Northern England. Although I consider myself an honorary East Coaster working for KPF up in New York. So.
I absolutely love it. I sometimes, when I drink too much, break out into a really bad English accent, which Alex, a former coworker of Martin's, told me is pretty good, pretty posh as well. So maybe one day when we have drinks, you'll hear it. But with that, are you based out of New York now?
No, based in London, just outside
London. Oh, awesome. Okay. I didn't know whether you were a transplant over to the US like Alex was.
I spend time there when I can, but yeah, normally London based.
Well, we're very happy to have you here. And thank you. It must be a weird hour.
It's happy hour. So it's,
happy hour. There we go. Well, thank you for joining us.
My slides. Let me know if I'm running a bit long. I've tried to time it under 20 minutes, but just let me know if I need to speed through it a bit. Yeah, thanks to Dana and Alison for the invite to speak today. Just a little bit about myself. Architect by training, experience primarily across that aviation, resi, commercial sectors. Worked at KPF for 9 years next month. It's gone super quick. Also kind of generally took kind of lecture on BIM, a master's course here in the UK, and also co-founder with some people probably know from the UK sort of side of things. We founded the UK Dynamo user group. I think there's at least one of our committee also on the call. But you're kind of running Dynamo events and hackathons and things like that in the UK, which we're excited to get back to doing now that kind of people are sort of meeting up again in person in the UK. quick bit of background to KPF. You may or may not know our work. Founded in 1976, so coming up on our 50th birthday in a couple of years' time. We've got 9, I think almost like 10 offices now globally. New York's our main headquarters. London's our second biggest office, and there are 2 main design offices. In terms of the kind of scale of our work, at last count, and obviously this regularly changes, but we were responsible for 6 of the 12 tallest completed buildings in the world. So that kind of gives an indication of the kind of scale we sometimes work on.
One of those Hudson Yards?
That, not even sure if that makes sense. The top
probably
100
doesn't
these
even
days.
like, well, I guess in the US,
Maybe
it's
top
probably
50.
up there.
Yeah.
The world, not, right?
I think
Japan
even in
has
New
some
York
really tall
now,
buildings.
it's the top 10 in New York, but it's kind of you've got to go stay tall to stay in that list these days. We've got about 750 staff, approaching 800 now from 54 different countries. We speak over 40 languages between all our staff. We've got quite a wide and diverse management team of 77 principals and directors around the world. And we're fairly proud of our workload. We've won over 350 design awards, and over 100 of our buildings are now kind of green rated to one extent or another. And just to give you, again, a quick visual idea of the kind of thing we work on, working across various different scales and sizes, but we've got Hudson Yards top centre there, and various schemes all around the world. So kind of moving on to BIM and kind of setting the scene for some of the topics I want to touch on today. Back in 2008 was our first Revit project, a medical centre down in Texas. And quite quickly following on from that was Hudson Yards, a kind of real sort of push to kind of make sure that's fully coordinated. For those who don't know, Hudson Yards is it was a series of towers built above a live train yard in central Manhattan. So there was a lot going on, trying to keep all the subway lines and train lines running under Manhattan once we built that. A couple of years later, we had our first project here in the UK. And from all of that, by around about 2012, kind of led by Nock, who I think is on the call today as well, our BIM standards have been firmed up. We first had a BIM manager here in London. And then kind of running through the years, we kind of looked at kind of growing that, kind of moved into new areas. And then for various reasons that I'll touch on in a second, we kind of went through a slight bump in the road, and I'll try and talk about how we overcame that. But recently, in the past couple of years or so, with Veronica, my counterpart in New York, we've really been able to build up the BIM team and really help push things on. And as Dana mentioned a couple of years ago, we had our first KPF Tech Day that really put technology front and center of what is essentially a very design focused firm. So one of the issues we had, and kind of maybe others have experienced similar, but we kind of almost stumbled across this negative feedback loop. A lot of our projects were very quick turnaround, particularly some of the Asian projects that we work on, kind of very quick deadlines. So it's this constant struggle between trying to get people trained up in Revit and being able to deliver Revit schemes. Of course, if you're constantly being told that there's no time for the team to pick up Revit on this project, they're not gaining that experience when the next project comes around. You're in the same situation. So we were really kind of keen to move on from that and kind of really push on. Kind of over the years, we've always had this battle against kind of that reliance on AutoCAD and that growth in trying to grow our Revit usage as our sort of chosen BIM authoring tool. Even in around about 2018, we had a sort of a change in leadership in BIM in New York. We had a slight gap between BIM managers, and we actually found that Revit use dropped, kind of completely going against the growth chart that we wanted to see. But the past couple of years, we've really been able to push that on and kind of really sort of maximize our BIM growth. And this was kind of a slide taken from a presentation about a year ago that we kind of wanted to get over this kind of steady but slightly stuttering BIM growth. to most of our projects being in Revit. And at that point, you overcome that negative feedback loop. You can quite happily staff projects with the relevant experience. The kind of target we set ourselves was about a year. A year on from that, we kind of didn't quite hit the target of every project being delivered quite how we wanted it to, but we've made huge progress that we're really proud of. And a lot of that growth has been down to the shift in how we approach employee learning, particularly around BIM and Revit. So again, having a quick look at a timeline back in 2012, kind of the earlier days of Revit. Like a lot of people, I think certainly here in the UK, I know kind of our New York office took a similar approach. There was a lot of reliance on those 3-day Revit courses. So you go out of the office for 3 days and you get taught everything about Revit. So you start with the interface day one. By the end of the 3rd day, you were using what was the popular back then, the kind of the inbuilt rendering tools. We kind of tried various different approaches to learning to kind of improve that, moving to a more kind of a just-in-time training style. One of the big steps that we moved that's been a huge help is in 2017, we employed a knowledge coordinator. So I'm not sure if any of you have come across Barry Levy that kind of heads up that area in our New York office. But that really helped kind of tie together some quite disparate elements of kind of learning, kind of really helped us strategize, kind of really helped us share knowledge between people and teams where it just wasn't happening before. In 2018, we signed up with Pinnacle E-Learning that brought a whole load of pre-prepared resources to the table, and they've been fantastic to work with to help us build our library in that area. But what we've seen that's really enabled this, kind of led by Barry as well, is this shift in our learning culture. So a few years back, we tried to implement knowledge smart learning assessments, but there was this real reluctance that kind of it was taking up time where people could be spent on projects, that there's also this negative connotation around assessments that kind of people didn't want to feel judged. That's really flipped. We've taken a much more data-centric approach to learning now that kind of senior management are fully on board with that. If we can identify skills gaps, if we know what skills we have in the office, it makes life so much easier. So that's kind of where we are today. So we're kind of looking at these strategies on several different levels in order to make this a success. So first up, the individual, kind of working with what does any individual person within our organization need to know to do their own job, but also to kind of reach their own personal development goals to make sure they're still interested and motivated. From there, obviously, we need to look at a team. So what knowledge does that team need in order to meet the brief as an architectural firm? And from there, obviously, we go back and look how we can assemble that from the individuals. So obviously going one step bigger, we need to look, in order to resource these teams, what balance of skills do we need across our global business? So from there, again, we broke it down a bit further. This is looking specifically at design staff, but we looked at it for different roles in the office. But in order to target training to have the most effect, we broke it down. So what are the most essential skills? And we realized one of those had to be Revit. We need to make sure all our design staff know how to use Revit and how to get the most out of it, alongside kind of more common tools like Microsoft Office Suite. For us, it was on that level. We then had our core skills. So these are the things that we'd love most of our design staff to have at least a good working knowledge of, that really help them with kind of different aspects of the job. It's kind of core tools like Rhino, like AutoCAD, hopefully only for incoming information, and as well as things like the kind of the BIM 360 platform and Revisto we've been rolling out over the past couple of years. And then we have preferred skills. So skills that we know we need on teams, but don't necessarily need everyone to kind of fully understand. So that includes things like Grasshopper, V-Ray, increasing coding skills. as well as Dynamo, and kind of moving into other aspects like Unreal Engine and Cura for 3D printing. So all that's then broken up into kind of various different methods of delivering this kind of learning content. So every Monday we have our appropriately named Learning Monday sessions. These are 45 to 60 minutes, and these are presented by a different member of our digital practice team each week. So it might be BIM, Computation, Viz, or the Makerspace team. And these are designed to add skills. So this is kind of 45 minutes in depth. So it might be, say, going into something like, here's the new version of Enscape, or here's how we recommend you do stairs and railings in Revit. So it relies on a base understanding of the software that we're presenting. In the past couple of years, we found that our bite-sized learning sessions have been super popular and kind of appeal across a wide demographic in the audience, in the office. So these 15 to 20 minutes, it's not taking much time out of your days, but this is essential knowledge. So it might be standards, technology, aspects like that. And we also do technology workshops. So this is 2 to 3 hours kind of hands-on at laptops. So this might be building up, say, Revit basics or additional tools that kind of really getting people into using Revisto. And as well, that kind of leads into our personal learning cycle. So this is specifically focused on Revit at the moment, but we want to roll this out to other software. So for Revit, people complete a self-assessment. They give us their own rating that gives us an idea of experience and confidence as well. From there, assuming they kind of indicate some experience in Revit, we ask them to undertake a 1-hour knowledge smart assessment.
This is for all design staff, not just like the people who are in the trenches, right? Like if you're a design principal, you're going to be doing something similar to this as well. Maybe it's altered for principals.
Yeah, so we're kind of working on like a parallel program for managing Revit projects. But for now, this is kind of like, say, almost at the trenches level of kind of anyone that's interacting with Revit day to day. And once those assessments have been completed, we've added a level that we're aware that not everyone necessarily thrives in a test environment. So we undertake a leadership review. So Veronica and myself review it with maybe the kind of project leaders or kind of some of our BIM specialists. So have these people actually demonstrated these skills, or have they kind of managed a few lucky guesses? Or they actually, for some reason, they were kind of distracted or didn't complete the test to the best of their ability. And we sort of review things from that aspect. And then based on the results of that, we develop a personal learning plan to help push that person forward and obviously ultimately benefit the wider office. So we kind of based on all these results, we break people into kind of different tiers. If you show kind of no or minimal experience with Revit, we kind of affectionately term you a newbie. On the assessment, if you get 8 out of 10 questions right at beginner level, so things like kind of basic interface, placing elements, you're kind of certified as a beginner. The next 10 questions were on schedules, curved walls, slightly more advanced topics, but kind of we knew if you scored well at intermediate level, we could pretty much put you on any project and you'd be able to do the majority of the work. We then had 5 sort of questions on what we deemed power user level. So this is kind of looking at advanced logic in Revit, using adaptive panels, things like that, and kind of touching on Dynamo. But what we actually found initially is that we had way more power users than we were actually expecting. So we had to dive into that a bit more. And it's
lucky you.
A couple of our lessons learned here. One of the things was we actually found there's a lack of suitable questions in Knowledge Smart. There's a load of good questions on Dynamo, but not many others. So it gave us a much more limited pool to choose for. And with only 5 questions, and a few of them were true false, it gave a bit more weight to those lucky guesses. Like, can you do this in Dynamo? Yes, no. You had a 50-50 chance of getting that one right. And what we found was there's actually a lot less applied user questions. So for a lot of the beginner and intermediate questions, you had to open Revit, change something, test something, and feed the answer back into Knowledge Smart. Without those questions at Power User, if you had time, it was a lot easier to Google things. And don't get me wrong, Googling things is a skill in itself, but we really want to know kind of what skills we have in the office on a Revit level. And we originally found as well that it was our power users that were super keen to do the test to kind of prove their knowledge. So they got in first, and kind of our initial results were skewed because half our Revit users were power users, which we knew wasn't quite the case. So we're now about to roll out phase 2 of that testing. We've kind of dropped the power user questions. They're in a separate assessment that is now optional to take if you want to show yourself at that level. We've really got a lot more management support to take these tests. And also we've included the reviewing your Revit skill level and your general learning goals as part of the annual employee review process, where it wasn't before. I'll just skip on a bit because I really want to touch on Tech Day before I hand over to Cesar. But one of the good things about the Knowledge Smart platform is it gives loads of stats. It kind of shows how people have scored on different questions. And what we also found, so that allows us to kind of really target our training, but also helped us find those questions that, I'm not sure if you've ever used Knowledge Smart, the platform itself is great, but there's a couple of questions that even if English is your first language, it takes 2 or 3 goes to kind of really read into it and kind of work out what the question's asking you. And we're not trying to test your kind of English skills. We just want to know how good you are at Revit. So the line weights question was the one that threw everyone just because of the way it was worded. So when we launch phase 2, we can use the stats to remove questions that we knew were causing unnecessary problems. And all this data really helps us to kind of understand where we want to target our skill levels, and kind of what, where we want our kind of user skill set to be. So a big part of this on top of the learning side was really reviewing our learning and kind of standards resources. We did a survey last year and found out that the biggest source of information was actually reaching out to the BIM team directly or phone a friend, basically asking the person next to you in the office. Whereas we had a load of good content on the internet that just wasn't being accessed. So we completely revamped our intranet, made things a lot simpler to navigate and understand. Originally, our digital practice induction was probably about an hour on the first day. And on your first day in the office, you work out how to do your timesheets if you're in the office, where the fire exits are, all that kind of basic information, and all the digital practice standards and resources. We're just getting completely lost in that. So we moved it from day 1 to late in that first week. So the whole of the digital practice team could really spend a lot more time and kind of really make sure that knowledge was taken on board. We're now revamping that a lot more. We've got management buy-in to basically make sure when you come in through the door, by the end of the first week, you know Revit. So that's, if you're an intermediate or power user, it's kind of making sure you understand our standards. If you come in at newbie or beginner level, it's making sure that you undertake training before you're let loose on a project. And that's what we're rolling out in the next few months. So kind of completely revamped our intranet as well. We made various other resources available. So we've got a software download we call our whitelist. So if you want to get into kind of using some advanced Grasshopper plugins, some specialist tools, you can actively choose to download those and kind of play around with them on your computer. We're working on our KPF bot to kind of speed up accessing information. So you can ask it, where do I find the standard for this or that? And really kind of building on our usage of Pinnacle and building bespoke learning paths for different types of role in the office. And all that is distributed through various groups. So it's not just you come in through day 1, you get the briefing. We've got our Bim Leaders Forum. So that's where Veronica, myself, and the BIM team meet with the BIM leads on each project. We can disseminate information to them, maybe on new plugins, but also get their feedback on what's working and what's not working in the trenches. We have our Learning Monday series and bite-sized series that I mentioned, and I'll touch on Tech Week in a second. We've been very lucky to work with Jacob and some of the team at Autodesk to kind of run Dynamo workshops, things like that, and really kind of promoting our Pinnacle E-Learning platform. So just to kind of finish off, I just want to kind of share what we did with Tech Week. So first off in 2020, back when we were still in the office, so we had our first one in February, before things started to get a bit crazy, both in the UK and the US. We always felt the kind of technology being a bit sort of behind the scenes at KPF really wanted to kind of raise its profile and make sure people were aware of what software, what resources we had. So we did, kind of semi-inspired by AU, we organized a one-day takeover in our New York and London offices. We had Autodesk, we had McNeil and other groups come in and present live. We put on a load of food to entice people into the sessions, and kind of really kind of get people talking and excited about technology. In 2021, we took advantage of the work from home environment for everyone being based on Zoom, and we decided to run a global week-long conference. So we had loads of presenters from different companies. We had a load of roundtable sessions, which I think were some of the big successes of the week. Really got people talking, and we had people like Dana, like Zach Crone, like Jacob Small, Bob McNeil, all came and took part in these sessions. But just to kind of touch on the kind of, we managed to cover over 70 sessions. We had keynotes, we had prizes for check-ins to encourage attendance, and we covered like a huge range of topics across.
Right there in the middle. I feel so honored. Right smack in the middle, next to his son. And Jacob.
So this kind of just shows some of the people we had on board. Mustafa, the guy behind
I think this is such a
fantastic
idea. I think more firms should adopt this practice personally.
Special guest appearance by Mr. Phil Reed that I imagine most of you know as well. One slight word of caution though. I think last year we really tried too hard. This is all run by our internal digital practice team, and 70 sessions with no gaps between them. We sometimes had 2 competing sessions in the same time slot. Like I say, we're kind of, it was meant to be a scaled down AU, but we had 700 people across the firm, not the 10,000 that attend AU. Some of the sessions were a bit too specialized, kind of went a bit too into the weeds, that we maybe had 10 or so people turn up, where some of the more popular sessions had 150, so kind of like 20 or 30% of the firm turning up to take part. And we also had a lot of demands kind of externally. So one thing we may be looking at this year is we managed to create a lot of buzz around Tech Week, but didn't necessarily get people outside the firm engaged unless they were actively speaking in the session. So that what we're kind of maybe looking at this year are the certain sessions at least that we can open up and kind of help kind of lead discussion in the industry. So aware I sort of kind of ran through that super quick. Sorry if I didn't take a breath, but hope there's some useful knowledge in there for everyone.
Many amazing questions. So I hope you didn't waste all your breath quite yet. First off, there is a question on how you leverage some of these tools and how you measure ROI if you do, like Tech Week or Knowledge Smart. How are you using some of those things briefly?
Both for good and bad. We've never been a business that's heavily focused on ROI. I've never had to kind of justify, if I invest in this tool or run this session, what's our return on that? It's all, I'm not sure if the phrase translates, but the proof is in the pudding. So it's kind of, if we show BIM growth, if we see that, track that growth and skill level, we know we've been successful. If we're not quite where we want to be, then we kind of roll things back and look at where we've maybe taken a wrong turn. But yeah, generally it's sort of, as long as we can sell the benefits, we don't need to go into the depth of kind of that exact ROIs and things like that.
In addition, how do you balance these types of things, like the standardization of control and affording designers the autonomy? In addition to that, do you have BIM staff that split their time between projects? You know, that do you have full-time BIM staff or maybe a mix?
Yep. So we've got a core group of BIM staff split across US, UK, and Asia, and they are fully dedicated to support and development of each of our own specialities. And we each have a list of projects that we sort of interact with and support, but generally our time is yeah, we're not kind of assigned to any specific project. We then, across the office, we have a couple of dedicated project coordinators that can help things like that. But we also identify a BIM lead that tends to be an architect or designer with strong BIM skills that becomes our point of contact in teams, for, like I say, for sharing knowledge and kind of getting their feedback. So
and
they're not
also
in any way
understanding the team, right? In terms of where the maybe this person might want to take the knowledge smart testing a little bit sooner, or get on Pinnacle a little bit
what
earlier.
Skills people have day to day. They know where that team's struggling and where they kind of excelling.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Martin. That was great. And hopefully we have a little bit of time at the end, but I want to give the rest of the time, or most of the time we have left, to Cesar. Thank you so much for joining us today, Cesar. Not pesky button.
You guys hear me?
Sure can. Can you hear us?
Yes. You see my screen?
Sure can.
Okay. So I'm going to breeze over some of technology and methods available in the industry to assess BIM capabilities. Again, I'm Cesar Escalante. I work as technical marketing manager for Autodesk. And prior to joining Autodesk, I worked for the past 10 years holding leadership positions in large corporate offices. I work for Flat Architects, Gensler, and HOK. And a lot of what I'm going to do today is just pick and cherry some of the ways I observe large corporate offices assess their BIM capabilities and then align them to their BIM implementation processes. When we're talking about assessing BIM capability, we're talking about collecting data. And in my opinion, there are three big areas that needs to be measured. The ability to measure staff experience, ability to measure resources and the capacity of production of BIM deliverables, and an ability to measure some more intangible things like a company culture. And I'm going to talk about those three big things. As we move towards greater levels of BIM maturity, it's important to understand what's the data we're managing so that it aligns with priorities and budget allocation from year to year. When it comes to BIM competence, we need to ask this question: what is the organization doing to have relevant qualifications? What's the organization ability to demonstrate that they meet require minimum BIM skills, or how do we track a history of previous use of BIM within the organization? And then training, what are the internal training programs available to ensure continuous improvement? So here are some of the tools that I've used in the past and I'm happy to share with you. There's a quote that everybody knows: if you can measure, you can improve it. And so it's important that organizations that are embracing digital data in their projects also do an equal amount of effort to measure the use and of technology within the ranks. I work in organizations that use Knowledge Mart. It's pretty popular technology because it measures skill proficiencies and identifies skill gaps that can be used to align training priorities. And moreover, just like Martin, ability to provide customized assessments. That was a big thing on the tool that we liked. And the assessments allow us to not only provide rough scores on a staff ability, but also provides the staff with the ability to assess their own progress and build up on learning resources that reinforce the missing skills. These assessments, at least in one of the organizations that I worked in the past, were administer once a year to all production staff. And the idea was to track progress over years and identify global corporate gaps in which resources were needed to improve efficiency. Also, at the same time, regional managers will deploy ways of measuring skills, not only on Revit, but across the use of different tools. On the screen, you have a table that identify by color a skills of different roles, being red, one that no one has proficiency, and green, one that it's very proficient. And this type of self-reporting ratings and self-reporting tools were also tracked on a yearly basis to understand and have a pulse of where staff, what are the capabilities of our staff across the different business organizations, business units, and the specific tools. And we could create these heat maps with and have a snapshot of everyone's ability. Each of these columns represents a person's ability, self-reporting ability in certain tools. Green is obviously proficient, and red is little or no proficiency. These kind of surveys were sent once a year. We would ask a person in the onboarding process to do a self-assessment, rate his skills, and then as time goes by, update their profile as conditions change. And I think the important part of this is that it will provide project managers with a very somewhat accurate depiction of how teams could be structure-based on a skills level. And it will also identify at a regional, local level where the design technology manager needs to focus on the training agenda for that period of time.
This is, I actually recall filling that out as an HOK employee. And I will say it was really daunting to do. It's not this big. This is everybody, right? Because that would be a crazy matrix to have to fill out on yourself. But this is everybody in terms of their knowledge and ability. I guess my question to you is how much do you trust the information of self-proficiency, right? Because I find that I usually will gauge myself like a level lower than where I think I am, right? It's like, I don't want to over assume because there's probably somebody that does it better than me, right? But maybe that's just because I aren't as confident as I should be. But maybe there's other people that might put themselves a level higher than they should. I will say that this chart came in really a lot of good use as a consultant at HOK because I knew who to contact. Like, oh, I should go contact this person because they know about XYZ, right? When I wasn't super familiar with the staff, it was really great.
Yeah, you're
great
totally
information to have, but I guess how much do you trust it?
You're totally correct. I think at the minimum, we needed to establish a baseline by which we measure everybody's skills. And at least on the Revit level, knowledge might provide a very transparent way of indicating the proficiency of the use of the tool based on specific criteria. But when we're talking about several dozens of tools here, we don't have that that measure as well defined. And I think we have to trust. I mean, we have to have some information, but there's the possibility of having gaps in the perception of how good you are at what you say you do.
I know when I filled it out, Trayvon came to me and was like, Dana, this is wrong. You actually rated yourself incorrectly. You need to change all of these.
Absolutely.
So, but sorry, continue.
And again, this is just one region. This is not the this snapshot is just for one regional office. It does not reflect the entire. I did not have an entire organization one available, but there is one.
What a matrix that would be.
Yeah. And so that piece of information inform the priorities for your internal training plan. And internal training takes different forms, just like Martin described it. At the front end, when you join the organization, there's certainly a technical orientation that takes place that helps you navigate through the tools available to the staff member. There's a lot of tactical training that happens in different forms, like Martin described, like one-on-ones, in groups, project-based workshops. And then there's also, as design technology managers, to provide a strategic advice to principals and operation managers about the business case of either moving away from certain technology or adopt a new one. And so at a strategic level, which include a high value brief to decision makers that will move the direction into the adoption or removal of certain technology from the table. And it's all about building business cases and updating operational policies and procedures. The audience obviously will be different from that of management and technical training. On the management side, certainly there was a need of periodically train staff on process standards and procedures and the contractual ramifications of using BIM inside the organization. And then the large bulk of the training happened on a technical side, where we actually oversee the quality of the digital execution, the proper use of different tools, and review of the project execution details. This is the type of training that I would prefer is one that's based on outcomes. And on the screen, you have a screenshot of how of an outcome-based framework type of training. You highlight what is do you expect the training to get away after the training, and some examples of activities that support the achievement of such outcomes. And I also keep in mind that the industry relied a lot on this learning module development, the 70-20-10 development model. It's formula that describes and is used by the training profession that individual obtain 70% of the knowledge in the job-related experience, 20% in interactions with others, and 10% through a structured training. And the goal for us is to, if there is any way to improve the quality of the formal training so that the experiential learning it's more efficient and with less risk. And the few tools that I saw used by these organizations to provide structured training were globally training. A lot of this is self-guided, and use this VARC learning methodology, which allows learners to use audio, text, and video, and let me try exercises. The Globally Training, like other products, have a Revit plugin that provides predictive learning in alignment with the tools used by the user in the Revit interface. It interfaces with a provider cloud-based repository of skills and a searchable database, and you can access live chat as well for support. More frequently than not, LinkedIn Learning was another great tool because it has a myriad of different type of courses that can target different type of audiences, and it has great presenters and professors. The drawback is that it may not align with corporate standards, but as a intro to the generic knowledge of the use of the tool, I think this is great first point of entry. And then there's another one that I've tried in the past. This is a type of training that is based on work simulation. And this is based on the idea that instead of spending your time learning on the job with busy professionals, you can actually learn on your own time using an online simulated work environment. 3dtraining.com team up with companies to create company project-based learning, where employees spend the first few weeks developing a certain type of typology using company standards, and the company provide progress reviews and live labs in alignment with the internal company procedures. And it's an interesting approach, a little different from the traditional online providers. I put it there for your reference. The next big part of assessing the BIM capacity of a company relies on measuring the availability and the quality of their standards and procedures, tracking the degree in which projects use BIM execution plans, and also keeping a tab on the digital and the physical infrastructure. The standards and procedures, it's critical in the delivery process of what we do. In the case of HOK, it was framed as a quality management plan. And access to these different standards was made possible via a centralized hub, which was updated on a regular basis by design technology leaders. Another way of measuring that capacity is via some kind of certificate of BIM compliance. There's an industry standard developed by Indiana University, the BIM Proficiency Matrix, which provides a measure way of assessing the maturity of a project. It's similar to the LEED rating system, and I think it's in alignment with NMBIMS, and a lot of this inspires some of the certifications developed internally by some of these firms. For example, HOK used to, I don't know if it does it anymore. I was with them from 2015 to 2019, but there was an internal certification. It is a platform in which align the delivery of a project with the standards. It was tightly integrated with the quality control systems, and it was an effort to standardize the requirements of a BIM delivered project.
So as it is 2:00, I want to be kind to everybody's time and let everybody go and remind them to fill out the survey. But please, Cesar, continue. In addition to that, I've also put in a lot of those links that you were referring to in the mural.
Okay. And I just have a few more slides to go through. Thanks for your patience.
Absolutely.
Tracking compliance of these requirements was something that technology leaders will take up on to, and keep tab of the infrastructure assets, what software you have, how you manage hardware, how you manage the plugins, and when and how your subscriptions are procured and expire. Lastly, which is the most difficult one, is how you embrace and measure BIM culture. Establishing a digital culture has been identified as one of the biggest challenges in AEC industry, in particular when there's no transparency about what are the operation and strategy priorities.
Nobody wants to share, right?
Exactly.
They want to hide their secrets.
Exactly. And so one way of measure qualitative metrics is using glint surveys, which measure employee engagement and provide a light on what are the staff perceptions on the actionable items by their technology group. This is an example of a real-time survey that Glint is technology that very easily allow you to pulse your staff with questions that measure progress over time. And so these are some examples of questions you may ask. How do you rate your knowledge of BIM? How many years of experience you have? You agree with these statements? And so keeping a tab on these pulses, it's a great way to qualitatively measure the culture of your project. Another way of doing it is provide recognition to people who deserve it. HOK used to have—
Give them capes.
HOK used to have these innovation awards, the BIM Awards. I don't think they do it anymore, but it was a good way to get people excited about technology. And some organizations also provide a clear path for development in design technology, which is an unusual professional path that all of us in this call are part of.
I want a BIM award.
Awesome. This was a 3D printed.
Oh my gosh, that looks awesome.
Support structure, which is very standard across firms. The measure of research and development that you have inside your organization is also a measure of how good your culture is and how receptive it is, the access to information, to a centralized—
Oh, the HOK Hub, gotta love that.
Yeah. And the level and the one-on-one mentoring, not only on the computer knowledge, but also in design knowledge transfer that happen on these side-by-side interactions. This was heavily impacted by the pandemic, but I think reverse mentoring, it's between a senior and a young technician, are excellent ways to and a legitimate approach in learning BIM and transfer knowledge back and forth between seasoned professionals and emerging architects. All right, so that is a little survey of the things I observed in the industry as a practitioner. Obviously, in my current role, I don't play that anymore, but I thought that I wanted just to open up some of the technologies available. Let's remember that all these different technologies and ways are to collect data and be able to plan around it on
Because what is BIM without data?
Exactly. So with that said, I just open this for questions.
I'm not seeing anything. That was a very thorough presentation. And Martin, I will say, was really great about going through and being very thorough on the board, answering questions. So thank you, Martin. We need to have you on here more often on Happy Hour. Happy Hour with Martin. Thank you both for those presentations. I feel like this could go on for another hour because I have so many questions still, but so informative. Look forward to speaking with you guys in the future. And thank you so much for joining today on BIM XT Network.